Hi, from the Los Angeles area. My name is John Kyo, for those who don't know me. And normally based in Toronto, down here enjoying the sunshine for a couple of months. This is Traceability Primer number 3. And I'm going to talk about transparency and trust challenges in global food chains. You can see here behind me a lot of words that actually are used to describe transparency, about clarity, openness, truthfulness, accuracy, believability, honesty, and so on. Lots of things to consider. I've been researching transparency and trust academically and advising on it professionally for about 10 years now, or close to 10 years. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go through both of them together right now, just at a high level. And I'll do this in 5 or 6, maybe 7 minutes. And shortly, I'll have a separate briefing on transparency where I'll go a little bit deeper. And I'll have another one on trust. So this is just a primer. Now let me set up my slides here. I just have one slide to show you. Here we go. Now, as you can see, I also have a role at McGill University as a professor of practice, where I'm focused on large-scale interoperable digital ecosystems in the agri-food sector. So I've been using this slide for about 15 years just to help get the message across around some of the key challenges that we have in the global food chains. Now, when you look at this slide, you'll see a very simplified model, but look over on the right-hand side. So that tonight, or sometime today, if you're sitting down for your lunch or for your dinner, look at what you have on your plate and try to figure out, where did that come from? Where did all those foods come from? So for example, if you bought that fish, then you might ask the question, is it really wild salmon or is it farmed? Because there's a nutritional difference between the two, and some say that there could be up to 40% more fat in farmed salmon. Now I leave that for the scientists and the nutritionists out there. But you may also ask, what species of fish is this? We know that globally there's 20 to 30% of mislabeling, and fish fraud is a significant issue. You may be paying for a fish that costs $6 or $7 a pound and getting a bottom feeder that costs $1 a pound. Now, in this model here, it's a gross simplification of the global supply chain. And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of different companies out there, tens of thousands, if not millions. And we also have, hundreds and hundreds of different languages involved. And we also have a few hundred different competent authorities or governments with regulations. And then we have a whole myriad of food safety standards and ways of doing things. But we need something to bind all of these together. What is the one thing you can think of that would bind all of this together? So regardless of language, regardless of technology, regardless of country and culture, what can bind them all together? The answer to that is industry standards, and in particular, the ISO GS1 standards. So think about that, very, very important. They transcend language, they transcend beyond specific technologies as well. Now, if you look at the challenges here on the plate, again, those three things that look like eggs are actually potatoes. And we buy the potato from a mall or from retail. They buy them from wholesalers, who buys them from a packing house, and the packing house gets them from multiple farms. The challenges start at the packing house. When they start to commingle potatoes from multiple farms, they wash them, grade them, and hopefully package them as well. Now, the traceability in the supply chain will start at the packing house. They need to know by batch or by lot which farms that those potatoes came from. Maybe they can minimize it down to 5 farms, or maybe it's 2 farms, depending on volume. But they have to get it right at the packing house. And it's the same for other vegetables like the lettuce that you have here, the leafy greens. The packing house becomes very important if that's part of the value chain. But look over here on the left-hand side as well, chemical factories. They get, of course, chemicals in from the oil and gas sector, and they make fertilizers to be used on farms. But we also have fake fertilizers out there, counterfeit fertilizers. What do we do in those cases? So significant issues in transparency and building trust in our global food chains. So we also have countries where milk is diluted and adulterated. We had the melamine crisis, of course, in China in 2008, and we have regular reports of milk being diluted in certain countries. India is struggling with this. There's a lot of social media claims, up to 80-90% of milk being diluted in India, but in government testing, it is actually significantly less than that. However, what is being put into the milk is disturbing, and some of it are chemicals that are pretty much dangerous for our health. Also, you should not be finding plant-based materials or plant-based DNA in animal milk and vice versa. So for plant-based milks, you should not have animal DNA in there. This is forcing the laboratory science folks among us to develop technologies to be able to detect animal DNA in plant-based milks and vice versa. So is this animal feed safe? As I mentioned a few moments ago, we had the melamine crisis in China, and then everyone thought the melamine would go away, but it did not, because 4 years ago when I was working at a laboratory in Ho Chi Minh City, they found melamine in animal feed that had come in from China. So it doesn't always go away, it may shift to another sector. So we got to watch out for that. Is this food really organic? Another one of the key challenges that are out there. And what I really like is what the USDA have done here with the USDA Organic. On their website, they will provide you with a list of companies that are genuinely certified as USDA Organic. But they will also provide you a list of companies that have fake products on the market. When I looked several months ago, there was 152 companies and products with fake USDA claims on their products. The largest amount of those was in the low 20s, I believe. From memory, was in the US itself. The second highest was in China, and then you have them all over the world. Now, the issue here is that the USDA Organic, as a label, as a credence claim on a product, it sends a very strong signal of trust to a consumer, because the government is responsible, right? So this is the implication in the consumer's eyes. So it becomes a proxy for trust for consumers. Hence the signaling strength, as we call it, the signaling strength of USDA Organic is very strong. And when you have a very strong signaling strength, you become vulnerable to fraud and counterfeit. So watch out for things like that. I would like to see more of the certification bodies also publishing a list of products that were found to be fake or falsely claiming a certification. I know about 2 years ago, I spoke with one of the fish farm certification companies, and they regularly post companies that they have decertified on their website for all sorts of things that may have gone on, including fraudulent claims. Is there heavy metal contamination in my food? This is an interesting one, because products like rice have naturally occurring arsenic. But about 4 years ago, when I was at a science conference in the US, the FDA said that children under 3 years of age should not be consuming rice or rice products because they do not have the body mass to process it. And about a year and a half ago, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC Marketplace, did some testing on this in Vancouver. They tested the toenail clippings of young moms and their babies, and they also found an alarming amount of arsenic. So watch out for that, because there's governments around the world, especially the governments that have high consumption of rice, they are not going to be transparent. They are not going to go out and tell their citizens not to consume rice and not to give rice to their babies. So what normally happens in these countries is moms have developed ways over the years to wash the rice a few times before they serve it. But when they do that, you may be washing away nutrients. Now, all rice is not equal, so some countries have a higher contamination of heavy metals than others. Can I verify there's no pork in my halal product? Very, very important. And it goes beyond no pork. There's also blood, and there's a whole load of other things that are not permitted in halal foods. Very, very important. But it's not just about what's in there. There's also the process controls. There's the reciting of the prayer before the animal is slaughtered and so on. Is there chemical or pesticide residue present? and at what levels. You know, when we really get into it, the science and the technology now is so good that you can detect significantly more trace elements of chemicals and pesticides. So there's, you know, the question is really, do we really have anything that's organic out there? And I'll leave that again for the scientists to be able to advise us on that. But I'm just pointing out these are the questions that come up that impact on transparency and trust in global food chains. You may see governments like the US and Canada with a list of rejections at the border because of chemical and pesticide residue present. Is this rice or coffee really from Vietnam? Now, I'm not picking on Vietnam here. I used to live there. I love it. But, you know, when I was in Vietnam, you hear a lot of rumors and you hear from the locals that the local processors or local traders may buy low-cost potatoes or carrots from China, wet them, roll them in the local dirt, and try to sell them as a local product. So we always have to watch out for things like that. There's also trade from one country to the other for domestic consumption, and they may be claimed to be local products. Is my honey pure or adulterated? We all know about Honeygate, lots of problems in there, lots of testing that can be done. Some of the technology now is so good that it actually goes well beyond what the regulators deem as okay. So a number of years ago, about 2 years ago, a German laboratory, one of the top honey testing laboratories in the world, determined that almost all Australian honey that's been sold in retail was could be classified as adulterated based on this new testing. But the Australian government jumped in and said, no, 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 that's not the case. Based on the testing that we have approved, none of those products are actually adulterated and they're all okay. So we got to watch out for that. The science is moving very fast. Regulation may be lagging behind that. Is this claim of 100% beef correct? Well, there's a couple of nuances here. We of course, we all know about the horse meat scandal, but there was testing done by University of Guelph on beef sausages. And according to Canadian regulation, you still can have percentages of other meats in there and not have it on the label. So instead of running to the press and saying, hey, we got food fraud here, always check what is permitted by regulation in your country. Because the science, again, will determine that there could be 1, 2, or 3 other species of animal DNA in your beef sausages, but it could be legal. Ultimately, what we want to know is my food safe to eat? And I won't go into these two, the allergens that are present and the nutritional profile. But one thing I do want to point out is at the bottom here, it's natural sciences, the analytical laboratories, the experts among us that really enable transparency and trust because of the objective certainty in terms of the ascertainable and verifiable characteristics of food products. So in other words, where I have at the bottom here is this rice or coffee really from Vietnam, you can say that, oh, my blockchain can guarantee the provenance, but herein is the issue. The blockchain folks confuse data provenance, or when the data entered the system, with scientific provenance. Again, the objective certainty in terms of the ascertainable and verifiable characteristics of the product. In other words, chemical or DNA testing of the product, where they can actually say that this product came out of that field, in that area, in that country, and so on. And of course, there needs to be reference files to be able to match up against. So I do have several videos with scientists explaining provenance on my YouTube channel that you can look into. Now, all of these things here that are on the screen, except for the yellow ones at the top that I'll go into in just a moment, these are things that a lot of technology companies will say that their software can do. Unfortunately, that's not the case. This is not the realm of software. This is the realm of science. And this is why I often jokingly say it's time to hug a scientist, because it's really science that can prove these with testing of the actual product itself, not the software. Now, in some closed blockchain supply chains, where you have a guarantee that the product is more or less in-house or within a very narrow supply chain, then you can, in many cases, prove that the data provenance is equal to the scientific provenance. In other words, the geographic source or origin. So watch out for that as well when you look at the challenges. And the things that are not product specific that are growing now with the challenges. Did the product come from deforestation? Is slave labor or child labor involved in the supply chain? Is my fish from IUU sources? That's the illegal and unreported sources. And what are the workers' conditions in the supply chain? So all of these become challenges in supply chains. They put pressure on our ability to be transparent. And of course, transparency enables trust, consumer trust. But trust is also an antecedent and an outcome of transparency. Let me say that again. Trust is an antecedent, it comes before, and it also is an outcome, it comes after transparency. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that somebody has to take that first step to initiate the transparency. So you need to have trust in the system. So can you just go in with technology and say, hey farmers, we want you to put your data onto this platform so we can enhance transparency and trust? The answer to that is not always. Because some of the biggest issues that we have out there and that have been identified, whether you're in New Zealand or Australia or the US or Canada, is there is a lack of trust from the farmers. And there is also a significant lack of digitization and digitalization. Now, those two words we separate them out as we get to know more. Digitization is moving from manual to digital, whereas digitalization is the business process and role automation. So many companies want to go in with the digitalization using blockchain, smart contracts, IoT, without having done the digitization. And the digitization needs to be based or should be based on standards like GS1 and ISO. You have to get the digitization right first before you can move to the digitalization. So with that, I thank you for listening in. I went a little bit above what I was expecting to do, so your comments and feedback are always welcome. Let me know if you have some thoughts, and we'll chat very soon. Thank you.